Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribed and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before the story starts, I want you to listen for one specific moment. When someone draws a hard line, then watches your face to see if you will panic. That is not communication. That is a test. If you pass by begging, you teach them that threats are a tool. If you fail by staying calm, they call you cold. Either way, the point was control. In this story, my wife didn't leave because she was done. She left because she expected me to chase her. The lesson is simple. Do not negotiate with ultimatums you did not create. My wife said it like she had rehearsed it in the mirror. I'm moving out tonight. Don't try to stop me. We were standing in our kitchen in Milwaukee, the one with a radiator that clanked every time the heat came on. Snow had been falling all afternoon, soft and steady, making the streetlights look hazy. I set my coffee mug down carefully so it would not shake. I looked at her, Imani Lewis, 34, in perfect posture even when she was angry, and I said, "Okay." The word landed like a door clicking shut. If you ever heard the words, "Don't try to stop me," pay attention, because what I did next changed everything. Before we get deeper, hit like if you've ever dealt with someone who used leaving as a weapon. Subscribe for more real, narrated relationship drama, and share this with a friend who needs a reminder that boundaries are not cruelty. Now let me tell you how one email exposed what she thought I'd never find. For a second, she blinked like she had missed a step. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had on her work blouse, and those hoop earrings she only wore when she wanted to feel untouchable. I could hear the dryer turning in the hallway, tumbling a load of towels we both pretended were ours. She let out a laugh that was too light for the room. "That's it?" she asked. I shrugged, not to be cruel, but because my body refused to perform. "That's it," I said again, and I watched the script in her head start to crumble. We had been married for 6 years. Not a dramatic marriage, not a cinematic one. Ours was the slow kind. Shared calendars, a joint Costco membership, and arguments that started over nothing and ended with me apologizing just to restore oxygen. I worked as a transit scheduler for the county, the person behind the routes nobody thanked. Imani was an assistant principal at a charter middle school. She corrected grammar in casual conversation. She organized junk drawers. She also kept score privately, like a referee who never blew the whistle. The day she announced she was moving out, it started with a small thing. I had forgotten to pick up her dry cleaning. One shirt. She came home and saw the empty hanger space, and her face changed. "So you just didn't do it," she said, not asking. I told her I got pulled into an emergency meeting at work, that the bus driver's sick calls had turned the morning into chaos. She stared at me like chaos was an excuse people use when they did not care. "You always have a reason," she said. I tried the careful voice. "I'll go first thing tomorrow." She leaned one hip against the counter and folded her arms. "No, you won't." That was her favorite move, declaring my intentions before I could. Something in me, something exhausted, wanted to say, "You're right, I won't," just to prove I was still in my own body. Instead, I asked a question I had been swallowing for months. "Imani, why do you talk to me like I'm your student?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because you act like one," she said. That was the moment the room tilted. Not because the insult was new, but because I realized I could predict the next hour perfectly. She would list my failures. I would defend myself. She would dismiss the defense. I would apologize for the tone. We would go to bed with our backs turned. In the morning, she would act normal and call it moving forward. That cycle had started after her new job last spring, when she began coming home later and later with a phone that never seemed to leave her hand. I had noticed the patterns and then scolded myself for noticing, like suspicion was a moral flaw. A new password on her phone, a new fragrance, something citrus and expensive, when she had always worn vanilla, extra time at committee meetings, a habit of turning her screen away when I walked into the room. One night, I woke up and saw the glow under the bathroom door. I heard her whispering. When I asked, She said she was comforting a teacher who was going through it. She made me feel childish for even asking. We had one tradition that never changed: Sunday fish fry at my Aunt Cheryl's in West Allis. Aunt Cheryl's house always smelled like hot oil and lemon pepper, and somebody's gospel playlist always had the volume too high. Imani used to love it. She would bring a fruit tray and laugh with my cousins, correcting nobody, just enjoying herself. Over the last year, she started finding reasons to skip. "I need quiet," she'd say. Or, "I have grading." The last time she came, she sat stiff and checked her phone under the table like she was waiting for an emergency that never happened. That Sunday, Aunt Cheryl pulled me aside by the sink while I dried dishes. "Baby, is your marriage okay?" she asked softly. Her voice was gentle, but her eyes were sharp. I lied the way married people lie, when they still believe in fixing things. "We're just busy," I said. Aunt Cheryl nodded like she had heard busy 1,000 times. "Busy ain't the same as distant," she said. And then she went back to humming along with the music, like she hadn't just put a finger on my bruise. I made my first real decision 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday. I had stayed late at the depot because a driver had hit a patch of ice, and we needed to reroute 3 lines before morning. When I got home, our living room lamp was on, but the room felt staged, too quiet, too neat. Imani was in the bedroom with the door almost closed. I heard her laugh, not her polite laugh, the loose one. I knocked and the laugh stopped. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes," she said too fast. I should have pushed. I should have said, "Open the door. Let me see what's so funny." But I didn't. I wanted to be a husband, not a detective. So I backed away and went to the kitchen. I saw her work tote on the chair and a keychain I didn't recognize. A silver trolley charm, the kind you buy from a gift shop. We did not have trolley lines in Milwaukee. I held it for a moment, turning in my fingers, and then I put it back exactly where it was, like evidence that could accuse me of being suspicious. The next day, I asked her about it anyway, carefully. "New keychain," I said while pouring cereal. She didn't even look up from her laptop. "A co-worker gave it to me," she said. "We went to a leadership conference in St. Louis. They had cute stuff." She said it like the conference was obvious information I had failed to log. I searched my memory. She had told me she'd be in meetings that weekend. No mention of travel. St. Louis? I asked. She sighed. "Do we have to do this at 8 in the morning, Malcolm?" Malcolm. She used my full name when she wanted to sound calm, but make me feel small. "No," I said. "We don't have to do this." And I let it go. Again, that was the second decision that could have changed everything. If I had pushed then, maybe the truth would have come out in the kitchen, with cereal bowls between us. Maybe it would have been less messy. But part of me was afraid of being right. Being right would mean my life was about to split open, and I had been living like the floor would always hold. By the time she said she was moving out, I already had a stack of small hurts in my chest that I pretended were nothing. Still, her announcement shocked me because it was so theatrical. It was Friday. She came home with a big canvas tote and didn't even take off her shoes. She stood in the center of the kitchen like she was on stage. "I'm moving out tonight," she said. "Don't try to stop me." She watched me like a scientist waiting for a reaction, and I said, "Okay." She started packing immediately, yanking open drawers, slamming them shut. She grabbed her vintage Polaroid camera from the shelf, her favorite object, the one she babied like a child, and I noticed she handled it carefully, even while she handled me like I was disposable. She threw clothes into a suitcase, then stopped and stared at me. "You're not even asking why," she said. I kept my voice even. "If you want to tell me, you will," I said. "If you want to leave, you will." Her nostrils flared. "Unbelievable," she whispered. When she left, she didn't just leave. She performed leaving. She dragged the suitcases down the hall. So the wheels clacked on the tile. She opened the door hard enough for the cold air to rush in. She stood in the doorway like she expected my body to lunge forward, like she expected me to apologize for something I could not name. I didn't move. Her face tightened, and for a second I saw something like panic. Then she lifted her chin and walked out into the snow, without looking back. After her taillights disappeared, I stood in the silence and felt something I wasn't proud of. Relief. Not joy. Not victory. Relief, like the air had cleared. And then, underneath, a grief that came in slow waves, the kind you can ignore if you stay busy. I did what I always did when emotions threatened to swallow me. I went to practical tasks. I washed the dishes. I folded the towels. I moved through the apartment like I was cleaning up after a storm. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Imani, I'll come back for the rest tomorrow. Don't touch my things. No, are you okay? No, we need to talk. A command. I typed, deleted, typed again. The truth was, a part of me wanted to beg her to come back just so my life would return to familiar misery. But another part, the part that had been growing quietly, wanted to see what would happen if I took her word seriously. I wrote, okay. Then I put my phone face down. 10 minutes later, another message. Imani, so you really don't care? I didn't answer. I opened our banking app. Most of our bills were auto-paid from my account because I like stability. I had added her as an authorized user on 2 cards for groceries and household stuff. She had never asked to be removed. She had never built her own cushion. I stared at the screen, feeling my stomach knot. This wasn't revenge. This was a boundary I had avoided because it felt mean. I froze the cards anyway. In the morning, I called the leasing office. The lease was in both our names, but I was the primary. The woman on the phone sounded tired. If she's moving out, you can request a lock rekey, she said. She'll need to be notified. My hand shook as I wrote down the steps. I hated that it felt like I was doing something wrong. I hated that protecting my home felt like betrayal. The maintenance guy came that afternoon. He didn't ask questions. He changed the lock cylinder while the radiator clanked like it was cheering. At 6:18 p.m., my phone lit up with her name again. Why are my cards declining? She asked, like the world had malfunctioned. I heard traffic behind her. Maybe a gas station, maybe a store. You said you were moving out. I replied. My voice sounded unfamiliar to me. Flat, steady. Those cards are my name. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. Malcolm, don't do this, she said, as if I had started a game and she was losing. I'm not doing anything. I said, I'm accepting what you said. Her tone changed quickly. You're trying to control me, she snapped. You want me stranded. I leaned against our kitchen counter and stared at the small chip in a laminate, the one she always blamed on me even though it was there when we moved in. I'm not controlling you, I said. I'm not funding you leaving me. She laughed, bitter, disbelieving. You are unbelievable, she said. I swear you're going to regret this. Then she hung up. My hands were sweating, but my chest felt oddly calm, like my body finally recognized a pattern and refused to feed it. 2 days later, she showed up. It was Sunday evening, and the sky had turned that early winter purple. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there with a duffel bag and wet snow on her boots. Her eyes were puffy. Her coat was open like she'd rushed out. When I didn't open the door immediately, she knocked again, softer. Malcolm, she said, and her voice had that careful tremble she saved for when she needed someone to rescue her. Please, just let me in for a minute. I opened the door a few inches. Cold air slid inside. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. The sentence sounded practiced, but her face looked genuinely tired. For a moment, my old self rose up. Protector, fixer, the man who believed love meant absorbing damage. I almost stepped aside. Then I saw her eyes flick past me into the apartment, like she was checking what she still owned. That small glance steadied me. You moved out, I said. You told me not to stop you. She swallowed. I didn't think you would take it literally, she whispered, like that was my failure. That's the problem, I said. My voice didn't rise. That made her flinch more than yelling would have. You say things to scare me, and then you expect me to clean up after. Tears gathered quickly, and she looked up at me like I was cruel. I was emotional, she said. I had a rough week. You know how it is. Then she reached toward my arm like touch could erase the last 48 hours. I stepped back. "Don't," I said quietly. Her tears paused like a faucet turned off. In that pause, I saw her switch. Her face hardened and her voice sharpened. "So you're just throwing me away," she said, "after everything I did for you." I wanted to argue, to list what I had done, to prove I wasn't a villain. But I knew that trap. Facts didn't matter if the goal was to make me plead. "I'm not throwing you away," I said. "I'm letting you go." She scoffed. "You think you're noble," she muttered. "You're petty." I held the doorframe. "You can pick up your things," I said. "I'll pack them." She stared at me like she was trying to find a crack in my face. "Where am I supposed to sleep?" she demanded. The question used to own me. That night, it didn't. "Not here," I said. The words tasted bitter and clean. Her eyes flashed with anger. "You are cold," she whispered. "I never knew you were this cold." I wanted to tell her the truth, that I had been warm for years, and she had treated it like something to use. Instead, I said, "Good night, Imani," and I closed the door before my hands could start shaking. I sat on the living room floor with my back against the couch, listening to the building settle. Somewhere upstairs, someone played a TV too loud. I stared at the little Polaroid photo strip on our fridge. Imani at a lake in Michigan, smiling wide, arms around me. I had loved that version of us so much I kept trying to resurrect it with patience. I realized patience had become my excuse for not demanding respect. My phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. "Open the door," it read. "Stop acting like a victim." I deleted it without replying. The next day at work, my supervisor asked if I was okay. I said yes too quickly. In the break room, the coffee machine sputtered like it was judging me. I kept seeing Imani's face when I said okay to her ultimatum, the tiny flicker of confusion, the way she expected me to chase. I walked home in the cold, cheeks stinging, and decided I would not be pulled back into that cycle. That decision felt less like strength and more like refusing to touch a hot stove again. You don't debate heat. You stop reaching. On Wednesday, I got a call from my cousin Dree. Dree didn't waste words. "Imani called me," she said. I stopped walking and felt my stomach drop. "What did she say?" Dree snorted. "That you locked her out and cut her off to punish her. That you're controlling." I looked at the snow piled against the curb, gray with salt. "Did you tell her anything?" I asked. "I told her I'm not a messenger," Dree said. "But I want to know, Malcolm, is there something you're not telling us?" That question hit differently because it wasn't an accusation. I was worried. "I don't know everything," I admitted, "but I know enough to stop playing." Dree got quiet. "You sound tired," she said. I laughed once, short. "I am," I said. "I'm tired of being trained." Dree's voice softened. "Okay," she said. "Then protect your peace. But don't pretend you don't need answers." She was right, and I hated it. Answers felt like knives. But uncertainty was poison I'd been sipping for months. That night, I started packing Imani's things. I did it carefully, not because I was sentimental, but because I didn't want her to claim I destroyed anything. I wrapped her Polaroid camera in a towel and put it in a box marked fragile. I found a little notebook in her dresser with school notes, meeting reminders, and one page with a name written over and over, Terrence. It wasn't my name. I stared at it, heart thudding, then forced myself to keep going. The notebook was not proof of cheating, I told myself, but it felt like a door cracking open. 2 days later, the proof arrived without my asking. A woman from Imani's school emailed me, an administrative assistant named Ms. Daniels, because Imani had listed my email as the backup contact for important travel communications. The subject line was Hotel Confirmation, St. Louis Leadership Summit. My mouth went dry as I opened it. 2 reservations. 1 room, double occupancy, dates that matched the weekend she had told me she was in meetings. And under special requests, a note, late checkout, please. My hands went numb. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was bureaucratic. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen until my eyes watered. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a standard booking. Maybe they did not separate rooms. Maybe I was misunderstanding. Then I saw the second name on the reservation, Terrence Carter. The same Terrence from her notebook. I heard the radiator clank and felt like the sound was mocking me. This was a slow unraveled Dree warned me about. The kind where you keep pulling threads and the whole thing comes apart, not in one dramatic rip, but in quiet, humiliating inches. My first impulse was to call Imani and demand an explanation. My second impulse was to pretend I never saw it, to keep living in the soft lie that at least she wasn't cheating. I made a third decision instead. I forwarded the email to myself and took a screenshot, not because I wanted to win, but because I knew how she rewrote reality. If I confronted her without evidence, she would call me paranoid, insecure, abusive. Evidence didn't fix pain, but it protected me from gaslighting. That night, I slept badly anyway, like my body was trying to outrun my mind. The next morning, I met my friend Jamal at a diner near the depot. Jamal was a barber on the north side, always smelling faintly of aftershave and peppermint gum. He didn't do long speeches. He listened, chewing slowly, then asked one question. What do you want to be true? I stared at my eggs. That she's just angry, I said, hating myself for it. Jamal nodded like he understood the shame of wanting a lie. And what do you know is true? He asked. I swallowed hard. She's been building a life I'm not in. Jamal leaned back. Then act like you believe what you know, he said. He slid his coffee cup aside. You don't have to punish her, but you do have to stop protecting her from consequences. His words didn't feel heroic. They felt practical, like someone telling you to put salt on ice so you don't fall. On the way home, I noticed small things I'd ignored. Couples holding hands outside a corner store, a woman laughing into her scarf, a man arguing with a bus driver. Life kept moving. My marriage wasn't the center of the universe. That thought hurt and helped. That evening, Imani texted from yet another number. Can we talk like adults? She wrote. This has gotten out of hand. I stared at the message for a long minute. My heart wanted closure. My pride wanted silence. I chose a fourth decision. I agreed to meet in public. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. corner booth at Lakeside Grill. I wrote, a small, neutral restaurant by a frozen pond. Public meant no screaming that could be twisted into a story later. It also meant she couldn't melt into my couch and pretend we were normal. She replied instantly, fine. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting upright like she was at a job interview. Her hair was smooth, makeup precise. She looked composed, which told me she had practiced. Hi, she said. I sat down across from her. Hi, I answered. She started immediately. I didn't expect you to be so harsh, she said. You changed the locks. You froze the cards. You're acting like I'm some stranger. I held her gaze. You told me you were moving out, I said, so I adjusted my life. She rolled her eyes slightly, like my words were inconvenient. I was upset, she said. I needed you to fight for us. There was the expectation dressed as romance. I took a breath. Imani, I said quietly, I got an email. Her posture shifted a fraction. What email? She asked too quickly. I pulled my phone out and slid it across the table. I didn't speak while she read. Her eyes moved over the screen, and the color drained from her cheeks. She pushed the phone back like it burned. That's not what it looks like, she said, voice tight. I nodded slowly. Tell me what it is, I said. She stared at the table. Terrence is the colleague, she said. We travel for work. I kept my voice calm. One room, I said. Double occupancy. Her jaw clenched. It was an administrative mistake, she snapped, then immediately softened. It was a mistake, she repeated, like changing her tone could change the facts. My chest tightened, not from anger, but from the finality of realizing she still thought I was easy to bend. Imani, I said, don't insult me. Not today. She looked up then, eyes shining with a mix of anger and fear. So what, you're perfect? She hissed. You're always so quiet. You think being quiet makes you right. I wanted to defend myself. to explain that my quiet was survival. Instead, I asked a question that mattered. Did you sleep with him? The word sat between us, heavy and plain. She didn't answer immediately. That hesitation was the answer. She swallowed. It happened, she whispered. Once. Then she added quickly. It didn't mean anything. I exhaled slowly, like I'd been holding my breath for months. My hands trembled under the table. I kept my face still, because I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of a scene. When I asked, she looked away, eyes darting to the window where snowflakes drifted past the glass. In St. Louis, she admitted. I was stressed. He understood me. I nodded, feeling shame flicker through me. Shame that I had been faithful to a story she wasn't living in. So moving out wasn't about dry cleaning, I said. She flinched. You don't get it, she whispered. You stopped seeing me. That line could have pulled me into apology again. For a moment, I almost took the bait. Then I remembered the one-room reservation, the keychain, the late-night whispers, Aunt Cheryl's question. If you felt unseen, I said, you could have told me. You could have asked for therapy. You could have left honestly. Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed sharp. You're acting like I'm a monster, she said. I'm human. I nodded. So am I said, and I don't want to be married to someone who lies to my face. She reached across the table like she wanted to grab my hand. I pulled mine back. That small movement made her look startled, like she forgot I could refuse her. So that's it, she asked. You're done. I looked at her, this woman I had built routines around, this woman who once took Polaroids of our first apartment like we were a family of two, and I felt grief, real grief, not just frustration. Yes, I said, I'm done. Her lips parted, and she stared at me like she was searching for the version of me that begged. He wasn't there. The consequences did not explode. They arrived like mail you can't return. Over the next weeks, we handled paperwork. We split the lease. She moved her remaining things out on a Saturday while I stayed at Jamal's barbershop, listening to Clippers buzz and men arguing about basketball like the world was still normal. She tried to call me at night, voice soft, promising therapy, promising change. I didn't engage. Not because I hated her, but because I recognized a pattern. She wanted a reset without accountability. I wanted reality, even if it hurt. One evening, Aunt Cheryl invited me over anyway. I expected pity. Instead, she handed me a plate and said, Eat. After dinner, she sat beside me on the couch, her hands warm and steady. Tell me what you're going to do now, she said. Not what Imani did, not why it happened. What I would do. That question made me realize something. I had spent years reacting. I had not been directing my own life. I'm going to be honest, I said, even when honesty makes me lonely. Aunt Cheryl nodded, like that was a real plan. I moved into a smaller place near the lake, a one-bedroom with thin walls and a view of a parking lot. It wasn't glamorous. It was mine. The first night, I sat on the floor with takeout and listened to the silence. The silence felt strange, like a room after a party. My body kept expecting a door slam, a sarcastic comment, a fight that started because I breathed wrong. But nothing came. Over time, I slept deeper. I laughed more easily. I took a bus route just to see the city lights reflect on snow, reminding myself I could move forward without being chased. Months later, I ran into Imani at a grocery store. She looked thinner, not fragile, just worn down by consequences she couldn't negotiate away. She held a basket with a single carton of eggs, like she had forgotten how to shop for a whole life. Our eyes met. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something complicated. Instead, she said, Hi. I said, Hi, and kept walking. My chest tightened, but I didn't turn back. The hardest part wasn't leaving. It was resisting the urge to comfort the person who hurt me. That urge was love, yes. It was also a habit. I chose my future anyway. If you remember anything from this, remember the sequence. The ultimatum in the kitchen, the frozen cards, the one-room reservation, and the moment I pulled my hand back in that booth. Those were all decision points. Boundaries rarely look dramatic. They look like small, quiet refusals that finally match reality. And accountability isn't yelling or revenge. It's letting the consequences exist without rushing to cushion them. I didn't win anything. I lost a marriage I wanted to believe in. But I gained something I hadn't had in a long time. My own truth, spoken out loud, without apology. If you stayed the end, you already know this wasn't about one fight. It was about control, excuses, and the moment evidence replaced denial. If you want more first-person relationship stories like this, where choices have real consequences, please share and subscribe. And comment on the one line from this story that stuck with you the most, because I read those and I build the next stories around what you react to. The end.